Welcome to Raising a Beautiful Mind, the podcast where we have real conversations about youth mental health to empower families and transform systems. Today's guest on the show, Rachel Miller, CEO of Closegap, empowering schools to champion their students' mental health. I'm really excited to have you here, and we're going to talk about Closegap in a few minutes. But before we dive into that, why don't you tell us a little bit more about you and why is mental health your passion?
Yeah, absolutely. So, why is mental health my passion? I was touched by mental illness very early on in my life cycle. So my mom had and has a severe mental health diagnosis. And what that meant for me was just that she was really unable to like show up as a mom and do the things that are required, of a parent. And so we experienced all sorts of things, including homelessness and food insecurity and getting evicted a lot and constant moving around and shifting of things. And so folks who come from a similar background will get it. It's just kind of constant chaos. um, and I didn't, when I was young, I didn't really know how different things were or how kind of outside of the norm our life was compared to maybe that of others. And so when I was younger, it was kind of just like, okay, I'm going to do my best and get through this. And I struggled a lot, obviously. It was like very, very challenging. And, depression came up for me, anxiety came up for me, suicidality. I have, many attempts under my belt. That's not something one should brag about, but that was a part of my journey for a long time. And self harm was a big part of my journey. So for me, it was like, kind of having this parent who struggled so deeply. And, she was a single mother. My dad wasn't around. And so it kind of just created this really, really challenging environment. And in me, so much of that was internalized, which is true of so many kids who are born into circumstances like this. And then all of this kind of, mental health struggle kind of was created in me. And so a lot of my life up until this point, and it's still true today, has been about navigating mental health and what it is and how it impacts us. And so I always think my life is just a lot about healing, and hopefully alchemizing some of that pain and struggle and hurt into something that can help others. So that's a lot about me. That's really what I'm about.
Mind blowing. Rachel is one of my favorite people on the planet. And Rachel, first, thank you for feeling and being willing to share that. I mean, a story is a personal, deep, it's the core of who we are. And so the act of being vulnerable and sharing that, with a bunch of strangers, that can be a lot. So I appreciate that because, like you said, there are a lot of people that can relate in a lot of different ways. And your story is not just beautiful, but it's also inspiring and hopeful. So I'm curious, because statistically, when you look at all of your risk factors, you have a lot of risk factors. And statistically,
Yeah.
you shouldn't be where you are right now. You shouldn't be doing what you're doing right now. What were some of the game changers for you? What were some of the things that built your own resilience or helped change your trajectory? Can you talk about that a little
Yeah.
bit?
Oh, Jen, I love that question so much. Yeah, I think I did this when I was 26 or 27. It was several years ago. I actually made a list of my protective factors because I just wanted to know. I think I had a deep fear that, and again, folks who come from circumstances like this will probably be able to relate. Like, I had this fear that at some point I was like going to go crazy or something very bad was going to happen. I had like this very, kind of strange anxiety around that. And so what I did was I like sat down and I wrote down all of my protective factors. Well, what is it that helped me navigate all of this? And like, can I see where, can I kind of uncover why I landed here as opposed to all of the other places I could have landed? And there were a few that came up that I think about a lot. So one was actually dance. I was very involved in dance and I got a number of different scholarships. I was invited to, to dance in many different dance communities. And so, in a lot of ways, yes, like dance became this container where I was interacting with others in positive ways. I was learning that I was good at something and that if I put effort into it, that I would get better, so I was kind of like building that muscle. And then of course, I was loved by my teachers and like my dance instructors and those around me. And so in a lot of ways, dance was a really, really important container for me. The other one that comes up, which of course informs my work at Closegap, is for kids who are born into circumstances like this, when there aren't, folks at home that can serve as like pillars of support or someone who can offer support, where the child can like create this healthy attachment. Um, People in the school building and outside the school building, so dance is a good example of that, but primarily in the school building, teachers, school counselors, school nurses, basketball coaches, all of these people become like potential or opportunities for that child to build out the healthy attachment and get what it is they need to develop healthfully. So that's such a big part of what humans even need to be able to like do anything really. And so for me, my biggest protective factor, I think, was that I took school very seriously. I like knew, okay, education is going to be my way out. I got to take this seriously. And when I became a teen, there was a lot more risk taking behavior, and I was not as serious about school. But when I was younger, I paid attention, I was serious. And so I kind of got this positive reinforcement from my teachers and school counselors and school supers. And that's where I got like my love, so to speak. And I love this quote. You've probably seen it somewhere. But for kids, who are coming from homes like this, they're not coming to school to learn. They're coming to school for love.
Mhm.
And it's true. And so, that was another really big protective factor. And then I would say, and I'm not sure where this comes from or how some of us develop it, maybe more than others, or like how we hone this skill. But gratitude is such a humongous factor in mental health. That's true for adults as well. And I
Mhm.
can remember from a very young age, this might even be my biggest protective factor. I'm not sure. But I was very grateful. So when something good would happen, I would experience like this kind of, big experience of gratitude. And I know that really supported me. So even when things were terrible, terrible, like, just really bad. And something good would happen, like, oh, someone would bring me a snack, or, oh, I would meet someone who was just kind. I would experience like a lot of gratitude. And I think that that fueled me in ways and actually still does. So I would say those three are pretty big protective factors.
Wow. So when we look at like the equation for resiliency, you hit all of the pieces that we, in the research we typically look at. So like dance,
Yeah.
having autonomy, having success in something, being able to have control of something when for so long you were kind of at the mercy of a lot of
Yeah.
different factors for you. And the one that continues to stick out to me is the love by those around you in school. And you're right, kids do not, especially those that have gone through trauma, those that are struggling with their mental health, they do not go to school to learn. They don't,
Mhm.
that ends up being a very secondary plus thing. It's more to do with having that connection and having that love kind of wrap around you. And for different kids, it looks differently. So I was like you, I went and I overperformed. I was a super
Mhm.
people pleaser too, because I was petrified of not being loved. But some kids don't have those skills or capacity. And so it can show up and look like disciplinary issues. It can look like disrespect. It can look like all of the things when you have a skill deficit, when you're not getting your needs met. it can manifest itself in different ways. I think the other thing that stood out for me when you were talking about knowing that school was your way out and knowing that that was your escape. So many, when I'm working with teachers, so many will say, Jen, I don't know what to say to my student that's going through all of these things at home. And I think one of the things that's so critical to remember is reminding the student that school can be their escape, that school doesn't have to be their, it can be more than just an educational space. It can be the place that they can come and disconnect from all of the other things going on outside of school. And then it also is purposeful. I don't know if you've read the book by Dr. Thomas Insel. It's called Healing Our Path from Mental Illness to Mental Health. He used to be
No.
the director of the NIMH, National Institute of Mental Health, and it's an amazing book. And he just writes about how there's three things that when we're talking about mental health, that individuals need: people, place, and purpose. And purpose
Mm,
is such a critical one. And I as you were talking, my gears are spinning about how that needs to look as we reimagine what school looks like and mental health looks like. Because I think, to your point of being able to have that hope and have that gratitude, those are so, so important. I mean, gratitude amidst all of the chaos
yeah.
that you were going through. How do you think that all of these pieces, because I heard you say you sat down and you listed out your protective factors, you've kind of walked through hell and back. How has that impacted you now as an adult? How does that change your path, your functioning, what you're doing, even how you take care of
Hmm.
yourself?
Yeah. Yeah. It's something that I think about a lot. I'm still very much in process. Like
Yeah.
it makes me laugh on like Instagram when people are talking about like mental health, because I follow all of these like mental health accounts and stuff. And sometimes the way that we talk about mental health is it's like a destination, and it's
Mhm.
not at all. Like mental health is this ongoing thing that is like changing and it's incredibly dynamic. And so for me, I always feel still very much in process. And things that I focus on, I'll start with like the most tangible ones because it's really where my mind goes, is like sleep has to be really dialed in for me. If I don't get enough sleep, I cannot function properly. My like mood is all over the place. And I think again, folks who, have some depressive symptomology or some CPTSD symptomology can relate to this. Like sleep needs to be dialed in. My exercise needs to be dialed in. Um, my meditation needs to be dialed in. So there are a few kind of ingredients that I need in my overall recipe to
Mhm.
be functioning almost perfectly,
Mhm.
or else things can get pretty wonky. And so that's where I'd start. And then I think really where I'm at now, I've recently kind of come to understand like I'm getting older. Like I didn't think I would make it this far. When I truly like I
Mhm.
really didn't. And it was funny when I turned 27, I was shocked. I could not believe that there was, a Rachel that existed as a 27-year-old, because I was just so sure that I wouldn't be around that long. And I've heard other folks say things like that too. So it's funny how convinced you can get that you won't make it further. But I had this big experience when I turned 27. I was like, whoa, I made it. And I had something similar recently. I'm now 33, where I thought, wow, like I'm a 33-year-old adult. And, I have this life ahead of me. And what do I want to do with it? And what it caused me to do is think about all the things I still need to heal. And so what shows up for me as an adult is still some level of suicidality.
Mhm.
It's nowhere near what it used to be, right? We have like active and passive suicidality. I wouldn't even say I'm in those two categories. It can come up if I don't get the sleep I need, if I'm not seeing my friends enough, like it will kind of rear its ugly head again. And now I have, the toolkit where I can go, oh, look at that. That just showed up again. Here it is. And instead of getting scared or like kind of defaulting to something I may have done like 10 or 20 years ago, I will immediately text friends. And I have like a few emojis or words that I send to my very, very best friends, just so I'm throwing like out an anchor to someone like, hey, this is happening for me. And so that way I kind of know I'm safe. I'm connected to others on the planet. I'm okay. Like it's going to be all right. So I have these ways of kind of navigating, some somewhat severe mental health challenges that might come up. Um, I also notice too, like I have, you know, I would say CPTSD symptomology that still lingers around like withdrawal and isolation. I think for so many of us who have been harmed in the presence of others or, who have been harmed, by others, it can be really scary, to like go out into the world and try and have healthy relationships. And so,
Mhm.
social avoidance can come up and
Mhm.
isolation stuff can come up. And again, like now I'm in this place where I can say, oh, look at that. It's happening again. So I've cultivated this awareness so I can see it. I can kind of, interact with it. But it's still a challenge.
Mhm.
It hasn't been totally healed. And I think, that might be the hardest thing with growing up in so much trauma is you kind of make it out, so to speak. Like I can really
Mhm.
say I've made it out, like I'm very safe. I'm
Mhm.
okay, everything's fine. And, you're not unscathed. There are still, big wounds that are around. And so, yeah, I think it's just still being like diligent with healing and also like faithful and grateful for all the ways that you've healed up until this point.
Wow. We haven't even started talking about Closegap yet, and we could talk for days and days because I think your story is such an important testament that so many people, whether it's parents worrying about their kids, people themselves, can relate. We don't walk around wearing signs saying, I'm going through this. And the
Yeah.
data that we collect, we have all these statistics, 20% of young people have a mental health issue. But I always tell people it's plus or minus 90% because it's so stigmatized that we don't accurately get things reported. And so it's
Yeah.
so common that you sharing this and the fact that you have built up this arsenal that I'm sure came with lots of trial and error over the years, moments where you learned the hard way that, sleep is critical, all of those pieces. I think it's beyond impressive. I think you are a beacon of hope for so many. I'm just blown away by everything that you do and have done. And you're so young. You're a baby, 33. You're a baby. So much.
Thanks,
She's just getting
Jen.
started, folks. I mean, when you're president, I'm on your campaign. No problem. No problem.
Oh, I love it. Thank you, Jen.
So
Mm.
why don't you start to tell us a little bit about Close Gap? How did this come to be? What was the journey? And then start to tell us a little bit more about what it is.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's kind of fun to start with like the personal journey before I get into Close Gap because typically people don't know really how I landed here. So, as I said before, I think a lot of what I've been doing with Close Gap is just alchemizing the experience that I had. And I think when you go through something that's so challenging and awful, you don't want other people to experience it. I think we're all wired that way. It's like we just don't want others to experience it. And so that's a lot of what fueled me creating Close Gap. And what it is, we find ourselves in this huge youth mental health crisis, which so many people, including you, knew that it was coming, right? It's not like the pandemic created this. I think sometimes
Mhm.
people think the pandemic created it.
Mhm.
No, the pandemic shined a light on what was already there.
Absolutely.
And so, yes. And so it's like we're in this huge crisis, and so many young people are struggling. And the systems that we have in place to support our youth are so woefully inadequate. It's like not even funny. And something that we really focus on is that the average delay between the onset of symptoms and intervention is 10 years. So if a young person shows some sort of, depressive symptomology or behavioral issue or, something else, on average, it's going to take us 10 years to get support in place. That's insane.
It is.
And it's my personal belief, and I think I saw this in myself too, is it's like it's in that 10 years where you're going it alone that everything gets way worse. All of that stuff is compounding. And so it's really, really important that we get to kids early on when it first kind of presents so we can offer support. And a big part of Closegap's DNA, and of course my DNA, is that emotional connection is really, really powerful. So when we think of young people moving through adversity, moving through challenges, and being alone, what that causes, right? And we all kind of know, like most people can think back to a moment when they were young and think of, oh, like I really needed someone to show up for me, or I really needed someone to say, like, hey, what's going on? How can I help you? So we all kind of know how this works out. And so what I wanted to do was create a way for young people to get the support they need in real time, right? So to like kind of solve that 10-year gap from the people who are already surrounding them. So again, teachers, school counselors, school social workers, everyone in the school building, because they're already surrounded by those trusted adults. And in a lot of ways, they just need to be connected in a more like formal way. And so that's what we built. So at Close Gap, we've created a daily mental health check-in. It doesn't necessarily need to be daily. Schools can implement it as they so choose. But we ask students, hey, how are you feeling? What's going on at home? What's going on in your peer group? What's your energy level? Did you sleep well? Basically, just anything and everything that informs their lives. And then we take that data and we triage it and we organize it and we make it really actionable by school counselors and teachers so they can intervene in real time. And it's developmentally appropriate across age groups. We're serving pre-kindergarten all the way to grade 12. And within the check-in, we have been able to uncover cases of suicidality, self-harm, trouble at home, sexual assault, bullying that otherwise would have gone unnoticed. And so this is really the piece, is that young people desperately want to talk to us. They do need help. They want help. They want our support. For sure, I know this, but they need it on their own terms. And since they're digital natives, since they're more likely to be honest with technology, this is the best way to give them an opportunity to say, okay, hey, this happened, I need help. Or, okay, hey, I've been feeling this way for a while and I don't quite understand why. And then those trusted adults who are already around them every day can offer that support.
Can you walk us through what it's like to be a kid that's using this on the daily? What does that look like for them? Can you talk a little bit more about that? And then what's the process? Is this information coming to you and you're doing something to respond to it? Or is it in the school?
Sure. Yeah. So for the student, it basically looks like just doing a quick check-in. It takes about 2 minutes, typically at the start of the school day. So higher need students or students who are really appreciating the check-in process can do it as many times as they want throughout the school day. We do have some students that do it 2 or 3 times. And it's just a 2-minute check-in. It's a safe digital space that we've designed really well. So the idea is we want it to feel and be that it belongs to the student, that it's not this data capturing mechanism that's just getting data to, the school staff so they can do things with it, but that it actually is this moment of like self-reflection and having a second to really start to identify, label, and regulate emotions. So there's a really big emotional literacy piece there, which is like we want all kids to have that skill set. Because later down the line, having that while you're navigating adversity, like, wow, you're going to be a superhero. And so we really want all students to start to cultivate that awareness and to build those skills. And so that's a big part of what they're doing. And then, of course, they're also saying, hey, I might need help with XYZ. And there's a little area in the check-in where they can put things in their own words. And that's typically where we collect some of these more severe cases of suicidality or bullying or what have you. So that's what it looks like. Older students can also do it at home if they want. So they can't ask for help from a school staff member, of course, because it's not during school hours. But we have some older students that will do it at like 10 p.m. at night.
Mhm.
And we're like, what's going on there? Like, and so we're excited to dig into that data and learn more of what's really happening there. But it's really just a moment for them to connect with themselves and ask for help if they need it. And then on the school side, they're receiving this data, and we're really going to great lengths to organize it because the fact of the matter is schools do not have time for anything actually. Like they are so under resourced and overburdened. And so our job really becomes about taking this information and triaging it in a way so school counselors and teachers and other school staff members can follow up with the students who need it the most. So instead of maybe, always supporting, the loudest students or the students who are
Mhm.
presenting with, kind of behavioral issues that cause the biggest upheaval in the system, we're going to let the school staff members know, hey, there are these students who have a smile on their face and always look like they're fine, but who are actually struggling with really severe issues. So we're helping school staff really support the students who need it most. And that can present all manner of ways, as far as behavior and all of that goes. So we're helping school staff intervene, and it kind of moves the school from this reactive approach of just reacting to student behaviors and reacting to things that happen to a proactive approach, right? Students are actively sharing, hey, I need support. They're getting the support when they need it.
Mhm.
And it kind of causes the entire school system to move over here to this place of being proactive and everyone knowing actually what's going on. So that's really what we want to do. And as far as your question around, what are we doing with the data? So again, we're organizing it so school staff can intervene. The one time that we really intervene is around crisis alerts. So if we have a student who has shared something about suicidality or self-harm, then our team sends a specific type of notification to the school staff, and we make sure that that's being acted on. Outside of that, we provide everything that the school needs to use a tool like this and to intervene in real time and feel confident about supporting their students. And then the school really does it. So our job is to empower the school and provide them with all the data they need. And it's amazing what schools have been able to do.
Wow. Okay. So I'm little Joe Schmo and I'm a sixth grader at so and so school. I have access to this check in, and it sounds like, if you have older kids accessing it at 10 o'clock at night, I can access it, whenever I need to. But it sounds like a lot of schools are doing it in a homeroom, or they're doing it so that they are, at a regular time, students are making it part of their routine. Then when I open this or when I get into this, I'm asked some general questions that aren't even mental health though, too, right?
Yeah, so we start with kind of more like mental health related questions, like emotions, energy levels, somatic sensations. And then if those questions are answered in such a way where like an uncomfortable emotion is showing up or an uncomfortable energy level, then we'll ask the foundational questions, which are like, hey, did you eat breakfast or lunch? Like, are you hungry in this moment? Because if you're hungry, chances are you're not going to be feeling very great. How did you sleep? And we find, with our middle schoolers and high schoolers, they're always tired just because of their sleep rhythm. But it's good for them to know, oh, I'm tired, and that's what's impacting my mood. So we ask all of those foundational questions, and then for students who it really looks like they're struggling based on what they've answered in the prior check-in questions, we'll ask things particularly for older students. Are you feeling lonely? Are you feeling like you're worth less than others? Are you feeling stressed? Like what we find with so many high schoolers is that, they have these, kind of budding romantic lives. that, there's a lot of energy and a lot of attention put into that. But then there's also like these huge like academic expectations and then expectations about their future. And so high schoolers, I mean, oh, that age group is so
Mm,
intense because there is so much on their plate at
yeah.
one time, and they're still really learning how to build that toolkit of like, how do I manage all of this? And so we try and ask those questions, one, so the school staff know what's going on, but two, so they can see, oh, wow, this is what's going on with me. And actually, all students have access to their profile and they can see what's happening with their mood over time. So they can see, oh, okay, for the past 2 weeks, I have felt awful. And then they go back and they see their check ins and they're like, oh, okay, well, like I said, I was tired, and every single check in, I got in a fight with my best friend 2 weeks ago. And, so they can start to recognize, oh, these are the things that are impacting me instead of it being this undefined, weird thing, which adults need too.
Absolutely. And I love, I'm a big champion of Closegap from the second I heard about it. And this is why. So I've been in education and mental health spaces for decades, and decades. And when I was a teacher, there's this guessing game of when kids come in, if we don't ask them or we don't make space for them to share and build relationships so they feel safe sharing, then we are guessing and making meaning on what we see based on our own experiences, our own background, what we think is happening. And kids are like icebergs. Well, we're all like icebergs. You see the tip of the iceberg, but we know there's like miles of other stuff underneath the surface going on. And so when I learned about Closegap, I thought, there's nothing else like, I know there's things maybe potentially emerging now, but for years, this was never even thought of. And in
Mhm.
education, we focus so heavy on the academics, and I'm not knocking the academics, except Maslow's hierarchy of needs has to come before Bloom's taxonomy. In education, that's like a teacher quote. We say Maslow's before Bloom's, because you can't expect kids to excel when they have these other weights that are holding them down. And in education, it blows my mind when we try and we say things like work harder, do more, try more, that totally negate the other reality of what's going on with these kids. And I think you said it perfectly when you said these teenagers, they have so much stress, whether it's relationships, pressure for the future, trying to succeed, whatever that even looks like, right? And then just all the
Yes.
things they're doing, athletics, clubs, academics, family stuff, work, relationship. I mean, there's so much. And the part that I think people struggle with sometimes is understanding that you can make your child's athletics soar. You can make their academics soar. They can go on to do all sorts of things. But we have to take a step back sometimes, and we have to put as much due diligence into social, emotional, mental health skills as we are with academic skills. We assume that just because these kids exist and they exist around adults, that the adults are good models, yikes, for social, emotional, mental health skills, or are even teaching them. And some of our kids are not as lucky to be wired that they can just sit around adults and pick up those skills. So Close Gap is the resource that schools have been waiting for, because it takes the guessing out of what do our students need, and what do we need to be teaching in terms of especially the social, emotional, and mental health. What are the basic skills that, or basic needs that some of our kids are missing? Food insecurity, are you sick, you sleepy? I mean, all of these pieces can help educators and these trusted school professionals no longer have to guess, but help intervene. And I think the other piece that's really important too is that when we talk about suicidality, the research is very clear that from when the second somebody thinks about suicide to completion, 75% of those are happening within 24 hours. And a lot of those are not with warning signs that come with big neon signs. And so I know, and I'm going to ask you about this in a second, but I already know that sometimes we get pushback from people. I don't want my child to participate in this, or I don't want them asked about this. It's a parent thing. And I'll be really honest, as an expert in this field for decades, working with countless families, working with countless educators and kids, the reality, whether we like it or not, is sometimes our kids are not going to come to us as parents, especially with something as intense as suicide. And so for kids, sometimes their safe space is going to be within a digital application that's checking in with them. And so while it's really well intended sometimes to think that kids are going to always in a perfect world come to us as parents and say, I want to let you know that I'm having these feelings of suicidality. That's ridiculous. That's not logical. It's not rational. And it's not neurotypically appropriate development for kids. They're not in that place. And so your app provides an opportunity to save and change lives, even sometimes when we don't know what's happening. So you mentioned earlier some stories where that there's some lives that have been saved, but I would imagine that that would be a challenge of collecting. How does one collect data on lives saved? I mean, I would imagine that your data, a lot of it would be anecdotal. I mean, you can look at like longevity of data, but what kinds of things are you hearing from people in schools, whether it's, counselors or parents or students? What kind of impact is this having?
Yeah, thanks for, I mean, everything you just shared is so, so spot on. And, just a brief note on the suicidality with parents too. I think so much of what happens with young people when suicidality is kind of presenting is they kind of want to protect their family. They want to protect their parents. So, of course, they're not going to go straight to their mom and say, hey, this is what's going on.
Mhm.
There's so much love and kind of protection there. And so I just really wanted to highlight again what you said, because I think sometimes parents are like, well, hey, I should be the one that they come to.
Mhm.
And, as you said, like developmentally, that's not even, accurate, because if they're older, they're not going to come to you with that sort of thing.
Oh.
But I think it is, kind of, an invitation to open up some space so that they can express these things and communicate these things on their own terms in ways that really make
Oh.
sense for them. And so I love that you said that. And, I'm not a parent yet, and I can only imagine how challenging that would be. But I do think it's so important for us to kind of like expand the ways that we offer support to young people and give them this space to kind of show up and share. And so I love, love, love what you said. Um, so yes, we do have a lot of anecdotal data about lives that we've saved. We're still trying to understand how to measure these things in the data, like, what kind of metrics we should even be tracking, how they kind of, evolve over time. So it's something we're really learning how to do still. But at this time, what school staff will do is just send us stories. And so our
Wow.
team gets to hear really what impact we're having. And we heard one from a school counselor several months ago who shared that there was a student who was checking in for about 3 months, and the check ins were very low. What we would say is like an uncomfortable emotion, uncomfortable energy level, just everything that was being reported in the check ins was not great.
Mhm.
And the school counselor continued to reach out to this family, and was saying, hey, I think something's going on with the student, and I think we should talk about it. And the family was pretty convinced that everything was okay, and so the family was like, hey, we don't need to worry about it, no worries. And so that kind of continued to happen. And then the school counselor went and chatted with the student. They like put together, I think like an hour meeting or something, and it came out that this student had planned her suicide. She was going to take her own life. She had written letters to all of her family members explaining why. So, as we know, she was very far along in the planning of all of this, and she was ready to to kind of move forward with her plan. And she was talking to the school counselor and just felt like, okay, I can share. And so kind of said, hey, I'm planning my suicide. This is what's going on. And it came out that she had been sexually abused by a friend of the family over the past few months, and
Mm,
felt that she could no longer move forward in life, and she hadn't told anyone, so
mhm,
it's like these things are happening, and our young people are internalizing all of it and not sharing any of it.
mm,
And this is exactly what we don't want, because then that lends itself to these severe decisions of like taking one's own life. And so that came up with the school counselor. They were able to talk through it. The family was brought in. The family was given tools about how to navigate the sexual assault piece, how to navigate the suicidality.
mm,
And, it's really a team, which is what we want to build with Closegap too. Like, we want the parents to be involved. We want the school counselor, like, we want this circle of support around the student. That is what we want. And so that happened, and now the student is doing very well. Like, I'm happy to report she's doing incredibly well. And it got hairy there for a second, but she's doing a lot better. And now every time that she struggles, or there's an issue at school, or something comes up, she goes and she talks to the school counselor.
yeah.
And this is what we want. That's what we're trying to facilitate, is that we're surfacing the issues that are otherwise going unnoticed. And then we're creating that relationship between the student and the trusted adult. So
Yes.
now when something happens, instead of that student thinking, I'm alone, I can't do this, no
Mhm.
one understands me,
Yeah.
they go to the school counselor, and then they're reminded, wait a second, I'm okay. I
Yeah.
have my school counselor, I have my family. And that's what we need to do for all students.
I love that. And this makes me think of the conversation we were just having too. We have to remember as adults that all humans, some of the hardest feelings that we experience are shame, guilt, forgiveness, or lack of self forgiveness, and especially for teens. So when you start to have these feelings as a teenager, because I was a suicidal teenager, 12 years old was the first time I thought I wanted to die. You have these feelings and they're heavy, and you look around the rest of the world and you don't see a lot of people. I mean, might be talking about mental health. I think younger generations are way better than our generations of, being willing to disclose more, but it's still not normalized the same way as if I have asthma, it's no big deal. I say I have asthma, I have inhaler. Nobody goes, oh, you have an inhaler? There's this stigma with mental health. So as a young person, if I'm feeling, if I've been abused, if I've been sexually abused or assaulted, or I just have depression, no trauma created it, I'm overwhelmed, I'm stressed, all of these things, I start to feel, and especially in our world, when we talk about gender norms, we put males, especially in boxes where you're supposed to be strong and you're supposed to man up, whatever all these things mean. And if I feel
Yeah.
like I'm not living up to those, or to your point about protecting my family, I don't want to create more issues for my family. I don't want to disappoint my family. I want my family to think and know I'm successful. I should be able to handle this. Why can't I handle all of this? Or these young brains, we develop our brain from the back to the front, the reptilian brain all the way to our prefrontal cortex. It's not developed till about 27, 25, 27, 28. So in the meantime, we're wired for recklessness. We are
Yeah.
wired to make all sorts of dumb mistakes. We do dumb shit all the time, but adults still act
Yes.
shocked that we do it when we really should be more shocked if they don't do it. So when I make this dumb mistake and I feel terrible and I've got all this guilt and I've got all these feelings, or a breakup, all of this stuff, it is not easy for me then to process all of that and then be incredibly brave to go high risk face to face with an adult, especially a
Yes.
parent, and say, I made these mistakes. All of these things happen. These are the feelings. Because what I feel like then is I have to disclose that I know I'm disappointing you. I have to then take on your feelings and your emotions and process that. So it's a lot better for me as a young person to avoid it. I'll deal with it. What you're offering is another entry point to getting our kids help. Because as much as I would love my kids to come to me and say, I'm going through X, Y, and Z, that's not realistic. And at the end of the day, as a parent, my child living has to be more important than if I have expertise or not, how I'm making sense of this tool. So you have to also know, Rachel, right? You have some anecdotal evidence, but it's going to be a real hard ask to collect data on lives changed and saved, because some of those kids, just the act of having a place to share, this is how I'm feeling, checking in, knowing that somebody's giving a damn. And if I have one adult that comes to me and says, hey, I saw and hear you were feeling this way, the fact that somebody actually cared enough to come talk to me, I would imagine that your data is significantly higher by 1,000-fold. You just won't ever know it. I mean, does that seem right?
It does. That really resonates with me. Yeah. Yeah. Because I think we know intuitively like what human beings need to be well. And so much of it is everything you just described. And so, yeah, I mean, we have our work cut out for ourselves when it comes to measuring all of this. But at the end of the day, when we hear as a team stories like that, or even stories, that are not surrounding suicidality, but where we know we've had this huge impact on a student, we know we're doing our work. We know it. And whether or not we can measure that perfectly and precisely is, for me, I'm like, I don't care. We're still doing the work. So
I agree. So changing and saving lives, if I were to put a price tag on that, it would be like what? $8 million a year? Is that what you're charging for a school to use? 10 million, 100,000? What is the magic number for a school to be able to access this for the entire
so
school, 1,000 kids?
yeah, so I love that you asked that. It is completely free. It's
Ugh,
completely free. Yeah.
free.
So we're structured as a nonprofit. We're a 501(c)(3) not-for-profit organization. And I really built this so every student would have access to it. And that means that we can't prevent anyone from using it with a price. And so it's free.
So, with that said, do you have every school in the nation that is signed up and rocking this? Can you talk to us about
I
numbers? Tell
wish.
us how many you got.
Yes. I wish. So we know we've touched over 6,000 schools. And
Wow.
what that means for us is that, around 6,000 schools, someone at the school has created an account on the platform, started to use it, is interested in using it. We have about 500 schools who have gone school wide. So they're using it with every single student. They're using it every day. We say that that's like a big, they've implemented it, they're using it as intended. We have another portion of schools that will use it only with high need students. Again, we love that. Do that if you want. However, it's a universal tool and it's meant to surface students that you're not aware of yet, which
Right. I
means
was
you
just
should
gonna
use it with
say.
all students.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
So
if
some
you're
schools
banking that
still,
you know who the high needs kids are. Okay.
yeah, yeah. And we have some schools that want to use it that way and we support them in using it that way. However, it's meant to really surface students. And so what we want to do, what our big task is over this next school year is to make sure that all of those schools have implemented school wide if they want, unless they're using it in a slightly different way, and to make sure that students have access to this. So now we're serving over 200,000 students. We are close to have capturing 6 million check-ins. So I think we're at like 5.75 million right now. And so, yeah, like, and the way that I look at that number, because it's so vast, it's like 6 million times that a student had a chance to share something that they wouldn't have been able to share otherwise. So it's really profound. And we want to get it to all schools across the US. And we're improving our check-ins all the time. So, the high school check-in is even cooler and meets them in even a better way. And we're starting to adapt our PK to second grade check-in. So it's even more developmentally appropriate and really helps them hone their emotional literacy skills because we want all schools to use it and it's free. So, if you're an educator or you're a superintendent or you work at a school, please do consider using the tool because it's free and you can sign up as many students and staff. If you're on the district level, you can set up as many schools as you want and it's free.
That hit my heart when you said almost 6 million check-ins. And I'll tell you why. So as a parent of kids that have also struggled with depression, your comments about it being a team and being a village are so true. As parents, we can want everything, we do everything, but what missed opportunities, and this could be a tragic opportunity to not be involved in a school. If a school, I say this when I train teachers in schools, is we have about 25% of our high school juniors in this nation, give or take, and it depends, different states have it, the data looks a little different, that have seriously contemplated suicide in the last year. So if you're talking about a school of 1,000 kids, that's about 250, or 1,000 juniors, 250 of your juniors. Now the rest of the kids also being surveyed, it's about 21, 23%. It depends on kind of where you're at. And some states have it higher, some are lower, having suicidal ideation. If you can't point out those 200 to 250 kids and know who's having suicidal thoughts, and even if you are, you're guessing, you have to
Yeah.
have a tool. If you're not doing anything and you're just hoping for the best, that is a gamble that you do not want to take. The odds are not even remotely close in your favor in something like that. I just don't understand why we continue to gamble with lives, especially of our youth, our most vulnerable, when we have a free resource. Free. What? So if we have people that are listening, their parents, their teachers, or their administrators, or maybe even youth, that's like, I would love to have this in my school. What do they do? How do they get this?
Yeah. So if you're any of the above, what you can do is go to closegap.org. And if you're a student, direct either your parent or someone in your school building to the website. Same with parents. If you're into it, go to the school staff member, the teacher that you like the most, share what it can do, and then schools simply move through our implementation process. And what that typically looks like is rostering their school staff, rostering their students, and they can be up and running within a day. So it takes most schools about 3 days, and that's typically just because they want to review all the training materials, which is totally fine. But if you feel that it's very urgent, you can be up and running within a day. And then your students can check in. They have their own separate login credentials. They check in, you log in and see your dashboard, and there you go, you're up and running.
Wow. So closegap.org, and I'll throw the website in the description too. Um, a day. Wow. Like you
Yeah.
guys have a slick operation. Now, how is this? You said it's free to schools. How are you funding this then?
Yeah, so we do have an earned revenue model as well as a nonprofit. And so
Mm-hmm.
if schools and districts want additional data, they can upgrade to our premium offering. It's still very reasonably priced. It's about 2,500 per school. It depends on student enrollment, but still very reasonably priced. And the reason that we really made it was because schools and districts were saying, thank you so much for the check-in. This is making a huge impact on our school. They were loving it. They were seeing all that they should be seeing from it, but they wanted to see the data on a group level. They were like, I want to know what's going on with my third graders. I want to know what's going on with my English language learners. I want to know what's going on with my students who have IEPs. And
Mm-hmm.
so we decided to create this premium product, which allows them to aggregate all of the data and filter through it so they can see issues on a systemic level. So they can come in and see, oh, okay, I can see that my juniors and seniors are struggling with sleep hygiene. So
Mm-hmm.
instead of just letting that go and letting everyone be exhausted and upset and not, functioning very well, we're going to go in and we're going to do a sleep hygiene competition. And
Mm-hmm.
we're going to see if we can't teach sleep hygiene things. And, you think about this, and no one's really teaching our kids sleep hygiene. Like parents do a really good job, but they
Yeah.
can't always make sure that their
Right.
kids are doing what they should be doing. And so the school should intervene a bit too. That's a huge part of learning how to be a human in the world is like, how should I sleep? How much do I need to sleep? I feel like so much our conversation is around sleep, but it's an important piece.
Right.
And so that's one thing. Another thing that they can do with the premium product, which I think is really, really cool, this is my favorite feature, is that they can identify the students who are struggling the most of the time. So you can see, okay, I want to see my student population who has said that they're having bullying issues over
Mhm.
50% of the time. And then they get to see all of the students who meet that criteria. And you know that those students are struggling. So you might notice them on the daily check-ins in the free product. Sure, you might notice them and you might be able to support them, but you wouldn't know that they've been struggling with that for their past 20 check-ins. Mainly because people aren't good at remembering data that way. We're just not
Yep.
wired to do that.
Mhm.
And so it allows them to see their students who are really struggling with these severe issues very frequently, and then they can offer an intervention. And
Yeah.
so that's really what we want to enable schools and districts to do, at least with a premium product, is have a good hold on your data. Have an understanding of what your student population is struggling with. Like, really, is it sleep hygiene? Is it anxiety and worry? Is
Yeah.
it bullying? And then intervene on those issues. And so
Mhm.
that's really what we want to do with that premium product.
Love it. So if you're a parent listening, you need to connect your school to Closegap ASAP. What if because I plan on winning the lottery this week. I know I feel it in my heart that it's coming
I
quick.
love it. I'm in full support.
And I have $1 million extra dollars. Or, if people want to donate, I really believe in this. I would love to see you continue to expand it so that more and more kids can get it. Cause I know you have to have tech people, you're building server space, all that good jazz. How
Yes.
can I donate? Is there a link on your website I can click and make a donation? How can I donate?
Yeah, thanks, Jen. Yes. So you can donate. You can go to closegap.org and you'll find a donate button. Click that. And just to give you a sense of donation amounts, for about $25, we can support one classroom using it for an entire school year. So
What?
if you can set up like a monthly recurring donation for 25 bucks, which, isn't that much. You can think about it, in cent like 5 coffees or however it makes sense to you. You can support at least 30 students using this application for an entire school year. And just thinking through some of the numbers that you shared, that like 20% of those students, over 20%, are struggling with severe either suicidality, self-harm, so on and so forth. And then the other students, there's a portion of them that are struggling with maybe more moderate issues, but that still absolutely need attention. And then there are other students who either need to share, but they definitely need to build emotional literacy skills. So kind of just thinking through where that 25 bucks is going, you're supporting everyone across the that spectrum. So we would
Wow.
recommend, set up a monthly recurring donation if you can. If you can't, anything helps. We're a tech company, and so we're well positioned to scale. So the money actually goes very, very far because it's technology. So
So,
anything that you can contribute.
and I would encourage people, 25 bucks, think about sponsoring a class for a year. Do a reoccurring donation for $25 a month for a year. There isn't a better way to donate and invest. The return on investment for changing and saving lives and changing the trajectory. You'll never know in that class that I'm sponsoring, how did this roll out and who, was impacted how. But folks, I've been doing this a long time, and I can tell you, I can assure you that the impact is huge. The smallest things can have the largest impact. Wow, $25. That's impressive. That's really impressive.
Yeah.
So, last question as we kind of wrap things up. I'm really curious. Well, I guess a twofold question. If you could pinpoint your biggest learning thing, the thing that has surprised you the most, maybe the thing that, has been your biggest takeaway doing this, what would that be? And then I guess I have one more quick one after that.
Yeah. I think the thing that I have really come to believe and know deeply is that young people actually do want to talk to us. I
Yeah.
had an inkling that that was true, but I feel even more sure of it based on the anecdotal evidence we have and the data that we collect within check ins. So we kind of, you know, go around and we have these narratives about, oh, young people don't want to talk to us and they won't fare with us anyway. And they're annoyed when we, you know, ask them what's going on and so on and so forth. And while that's true, they definitely need to share on their own terms. What I've learned is that young people desperately want to talk to us. They desperately need to talk to us. They want to share, but they need to do it in a container that makes sense to them, right? They need to do it
Mhm.
on their own terms. And that's really, you know, what we want to create. And so I think that that's probably the biggest thing that I've learned, is just that we need to be careful of some of these taken for granted narratives that we have about
Mm,
what youth need and what they want. And, you
yeah.
know, because that comes from an older time that was, you know, informed by all sorts of stuff that is not necessarily true.
Yeah.
And so I would just, you know, I would really invite everyone to kind of question some of those narratives we have about how youth show up because they're not really correct.
Yeah. Well, and feel free if anybody has questions about that, reach out to me because I present and train schools and businesses all the time about we use a factory model for so much. You know, our mindset and our narratives are from about almost 100 years ago. And yet we're still perpetuating them in a modern workplace and in a modern school place that is incredibly different. I mean, if nothing else, just look at technology. You know, if you're as
Yeah.
young as I am when I was young, we didn't have like we had an old TV set that had like 6 channels and you had to get your butt off the couch and go flip the thing, you know? We didn't even have voicemail and answering. I mean, technology alone has changed how our kids are experiencing the world, and that means that changes how we have to show up for them. So my last
Mm.
question, if you're why you are the one of the wisest people I've ever met, if you could say one thing, whether it's to parents or to youth or to educators or professionals or anybody about anything, what is your one thing that you want people to know? What's your one words of wisdom you want to leave everybody with?
That's such a good question.
And here I put you on the
The
spot.
thing
Yeah.
I would say, trust yourself. And I'm really thinking about it probably from the perspective more from youth, but I actually think that I would recommend that for like parents and educators and everyone else too. Like we have, and I certainly use this, you know, moving through my childhood and moving through my life experience, which is, you know, we all kind of have like this voice inside that's like guiding us or leading us or, you know, what have you, like how whatever language you want to use, we have
Yeah.
some sort of guidance within ourselves. You know, and we come to see it when we're getting advice from the outside world and it doesn't feel quite right. Right.
Yeah.
It's like we have that thing that happens inside and we're like, oh, that's not quite right for me. I
Yes.
think, especially for young people, listen to that voice because as you move into middle school and high school, and you're going to have all of these new people and new dynamics and new things that you're moving through, and even for younger kids too, you're going to be moving through spaces, containers, what have you, that may not resonate. And if
Mhm.
you don't listen to that voice, you're going to put yourself in a funky spot where you may have less choice. And so, something that I always talk to with youth too is like try and put yourself in positions where you have a lot of choice in front of you know, as much as you can. And especially for youth who, you know, come from challenging circumstances, it's true, you have less choice than maybe a counterpart at school. But always try and put yourself in a position of having more choice and listening to that voice inside of you because it's not going to guide you to a bad place, you
Mm.
know. And that's why this self-reflection and all of that is so important, is so young people can really start to cultivate listening to that.
Rachel, you continue to be one of my favorite people on the planet. You are inspiring, you are tenacious, and you are really making a difference. And so I really appreciate that you gave us this time today to impart all of this wisdom. Everybody needs to go to closegap.org, check it out ASAP. get your schools on board, gift it to them. What a great, like with holidays coming up, people should be gifting to their schools. There isn't, I was a teacher, there is not a
Oh, I
better
love
teacher
that.
gift. Yes, absolutely. So I really appreciate you again, Rachel. Marvelous as always. Hey, if you like what you heard, do me a little favor and hit that subscribe button, then make sure you share it with all your friends.